What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy live, presented by Sticks.com. I'm Katie Gause, joined by Andrew McInnes, and we are here to talk all things playoff hockey, but most importantly, our game of the night, which was Washington and Montreal. The series is over. The Capitals are moving on to the second round after a big victory. And I got to start things off with you, Andrew, because I did some homework. I know that you are a big Habs fan. So why don't you kick it off by just telling us how you and the rest of the Habs fans are feeling right now about this team who really showed us a lot, especially getting into this point.
Katie, great to see you. Great to be here with everybody here live. And I'll tell you, I'm feeling disappointed.
Yeah.
But when I zoom out, I should be feeling really proud as a Montreal Canadiens fan. And I think for all the fans on social media, all the viewers watching the game tonight, you're feeling upset. But if you feel upset tonight, just think about how upset you were on December 30th or November 1st or even in March, when things weren't looking in reach. And when you zoom out, you feel a lot better. But there's a lot of things that they can take away from this series. I think the most frustrating feeling is how close some of the games were scoreboard wise. Maybe not as far as possession, maybe not as far as, chances created, but looking at the scoreboard, it can be very frustrating because not this game tonight, but the three other victories for the Capitals, taking away the empty net goals, all 1-goal games. So that can be very frustrating. But if you ask me how I was feeling in December, I would tell you a lot worse than I am right now. So the future is very bright.
Yeah, and we will talk a little bit more about the future. But when you look at this series overall, you kind of mentioned it there, how, this wasn't just an absolute walk for Washington, right? There were tough games each night. What do you think Montreal showed about their team, about their identity, and what maybe fans are going to be able to expect from this team moving forward in this playoff series?
I think the resiliency. I think that we saw in the later part of the season as well. We saw a lot of comebacks as well for this Montreal Canadiens team. The forecheck is one thing they've really prided themselves on. And I've been kind of hounding on the fact that they're missing a second line. Everybody in the world that follows the NHL knows the Canadiens are missing a second line center. But the forecheck I was really proud of. And if you take a look at the power play, that after Patrick Laine was injured, Ivan Demidov gets moved to PP1, and the oldest player on the power play after Laine went down was 25 years old. You've got a 23 years old, 24-year-old, and 19-year-old. The youth really got that experience. So it's one thing you can really take away. And look, I don't want to take anything away from a player like David Savard, who had a tremendous career. He's retiring after tonight, his last game in the NHL. Mike Matheson, as much as he can be sometimes on my nerves, he's a guy that's a veteran for this team, and he knows how to get the job done. But the youth, Katie, I think the youth we can be the most proud of. The young players getting the experience they certainly deserve.
Well, and I'm coming into this playoffs. I think one of the bigger stories towards the end of the season and the start of the playoffs was the addition of Demidov and what we could expect from him and what that was going to look like. What did you see from him in these couple games that has you really excited? Because there were some incredible flashes.
Puck possession. He wants the puck on his stick. He wants to hold on to it. But also one thing that I learned, I saw a few clips from the KHL, but all I really knew about him was what I was seeing from the social media clips I saw, that he's also a playmaker as well. I mean, his 2 points of the series were 2 power play assists. He can move the puck, he can create, but he's also very patient. And one thing a lot of people will tell you is young players, not just in the playoffs, but during the regular season, preseason, whatever it may be, sometimes they're almost eager to get the puck off their stick. Juraj Slafkovsky struggled with that for a long time. Like right when the puck went near him, he almost wanted to get rid of it. So the patience that he has is really impressive. But I know I'm going to probably harp on it a lot on tonight's postgame show. The lack of a second line and the fact that Demidov was out there with Newhook and Evans, it's nothing against them. But those two players aren't second-line players. So you saw so much more skill from Demidov on the power play than you really got to on 5-on-5.
Well, and we talked about this in other shows, but leading into, the trade deadline, Montreal certainly didn't choose to be sellers, but they maybe weren't going out and making moves either. They don't want to necessarily mess with what they have. They are still ultimately aware of the fact that this isn't a win now situation per se. Of course, it's great to get into the playoffs. It's great to get that experience for the younger guys, but they weren't out there making crazy moves. So maybe there is an example of why, of course, you're not going to have perfect depth all the way up and down your lineup. We've got a question here and a reminder to everyone watching that throughout the show, we'll be taking questions. We love to see your questions, your comments, so feel free to send those in. But this one says, do you see any improvement from the last 5 games, or is this team stuck? And I think we could agree we probably saw some improvement for sure. If nothing else, they're learning a lot.
We saw the comfortability level
Yeah.
rise. That's what I
Yeah.
really saw, is the players get a little more confident as well. But I saw a lot of social media posts from reporters and people that cover the Montreal Canadiens, and a lot of what we saw accepting the defeat was saying, well, Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon, they now know what the recipe is to make the playoffs. Now you need to know what the team needs to have to win rounds in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Those two things are very different. Just ask the Toronto Maple Leafs. We won't get into that, though. This is my Montreal Canadiens fandom kicking in here. But it's a
Save that
big
one.
difference between the regular season and the playoffs. So did we see improvement? We certainly did. We saw them get more comfortable. We saw the players kind of want to make those plays a lot more. I just wish we saw some more of that third period play in the first and second. That desperation was there in every game they played in, but they didn't really start the game with that.
Yeah, and I guess another one that they probably didn't see coming was having to rely on Dobish, right? I mean,
Yes.
Montembeault goes down, and he's been excellent. He's kind of taken a step, but then Dobish coming in, proving that he can handle big moments. I mean, goaltending across the NHL is an area that teams are a lot of the time struggling to find reliability, and it feels like they got a lot of lessons there, and they really were able to learn more about what their goaltending future could look like.
It's funny you say that, because sometimes people talk about garbage time or garbage games at
Mhm.
the end of the year. Players are playing for contracts or playing for deals. You hear about it in all sports. I've never really considered it in the playoffs where players are playing for deals or
Yeah.
spots, but Jakub Dobish just solidified himself as the
Right?
backup goalie for years to come. We all know, as Montreal Canadian, followers or fans of the NHL, how great Jacob Fowler is in the future for him, that great prospect. But Dobish says, hey, I'm here. I'm
Yeah.
ready. I'm not scared of the moment. And look at that first goal. I don't think that's his fault. Ovechkin from the slot, not his office, but from the
Mhm.
slot off the faceoff. And then the second one, Jacob Chikrin, backdoor tap in. Caulfield gets caught sleeping. I don't think either of those two goals were Dobish's fault whatsoever.
And we've got some updates from around the league with some scores because there is another very important game going on. That is the Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Florida now up 6-3 over Tampa. Just over 3 minutes left in that game. So it is looking like it is game over for Tampa. I want to touch on that series really quickly, just as we're mentioning the score. Has that been maybe one of the most exciting series in terms of maybe extracurriculars, maybe some of the other antics? It's kind of a bummer that it's ending the way that it is now. I would have loved for 7 games of that. But how much have you enjoyed seeing some of the South Florida antics?
You knew it was going to be a bloodbath the
Yeah,
second that
so
series
much
started.
hate.
I didn't think the coaches would get involved throwing
Oh, I know.
uh,
Drama in the press conference
yes.
rooms, right?
It makes it even more exciting when the coaches get involved and the play. I look, a dirty hit from one team followed up by a dirty hit by the other. It's really a shame. You couldn't have said it any better. It's a shame that we're not going to get more games between those two teams. I couldn't believe it. I was on for the post game after the last game, and I was shocked. The fact that it was 2-1 Tampa. The next thing I knew, it was 4-2 Florida. That's what's so dangerous about this Florida Panthers team, because oh, you want to play physical? We can play that. Oh, you want to
Oh,
play skill? We
sure.
can play that. They can do it all, Katie. They really can.
Yeah, I mean, the physicality, they're taking on a whole nother level. They're almost getting to the point where, and this is hard for me to say because I obviously love them having worked there, but I'm starting to wonder, are we getting a little too dirty? I mean, they play with an edge, and I love that, and that's playoff hockey. But it's certainly gotten interesting. The Ekblad suspension, they're clearly trying to send a message. The NHL player safety is probably glad that this series is over, if we're being honest, because they don't want
Good
to have to
point.
deal with any more drama on the ice or off the ice. But we shall see. We mentioned coaches and how there was drama between all of them, between Cooper and Maurice. But here's another question we've got. It's how much of tonight's loss for the Habs falls on coaching versus execution? So touching back on our original game of the night, what do you see from this question?
Well, one thing that comes to my mind the second I see that question, Marty St. Louis was never shy to admit that he's still developing as a coach as well.
Yeah.
And we touched on the fact that where they were in November and December as a team. And I'll never forget the fire Marty tweets from Canadiens fans. And even a lot of podcasts, a lot of people, is Marty St. Louis to blame? I don't know if you agree with me, Katie. I'm curious your thoughts on this. I said this a few days ago on the post-game show. I kind of think that goaltenders and coaches get very similar press. If they're playing poorly, they're in the headline. If they're playing well, it's the team that gets the praise. You'll never hear Martin St. Louis leads the team to success, but if they lose 8 of their last 10, is Marty St. Louis' job on the line? So I think that he's earned his stripes by even making the playoffs right now. And I think that the lack of depth is overall what hurt the Canadiens.
Well, I agree with you. I think by being in there, he has solidified any questions that could exist. But I think just even if they had fallen short, of making it, the run that they went on, the way he was able to control this team, to guide them, to turn things around, speaks for itself. I think he has secured himself as a coach. It'll be interesting to see what he continues to do, because as he's learning, I assume he's only going to get better, because this isn't necessarily a guy that's been doing this for years, right? Like you mentioned, he said it, he's still learning. In terms of the press, I think I agree, although I would say goalies certainly have a much shorter leash in terms of when people are willing to jump on them. They get maybe 2-3 bad games in a row, and it's just chaos from the fans and the media, versus coaches, depending on maybe how long they've been with the team. I feel like coaches that have been around a while, people are maybe quicker to jump on them because they're just like, oh, this is stale. They've lost the room. When you look at the coaching carousel in the NHL right now, I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say that it's never been a harder time to be an NHL head coach and make everyone happy. There's so many vacant jobs. We've seen what happened in Boston, and then Jim Montgomery goes to the St. Louis Blues. Now they're in the playoffs when they were totally dead in the water for quite a while. And we'll update you actually on that one. It is 2-1 Winnipeg. We obviously know that series tied 2-2. So this is a big one for the Jets, obviously getting to come back home and having not performed well in St. Louis, to say the least. Let's talk a little bit more about this Washington series, though. So they move on. This is the first time, Andrew, that they're moving on since 2018 when they won the Stanley Cup. They will face Carolina. Just kind of initial impressions from you about what you think, because to me, I think a lot of people weren't sure if Washington could continue what they've done in the regular season. The Ovechkin great chase was over. Is that going to deflate things? Is everyone that's been clicking so well going to continue? Is Spencer Carberry's coaching going to carry over? What's the style looking like? And maybe it's going to be interesting to see what the matchup with Carolina brings from this team. But what do you think about this series just on the surface?
I think that it's going to be very similar as far as tight checking, low scoring. We're going to get back to seeing probably some lower scoring Carolina Hurricanes games. We saw a couple of them reach some higher goal totals than we thought they would. But when we look at these two metropolitan teams, they're kind of built on the exact same frame. They're built on the same idea that you get a lead, you be physical, you protect it, you get pucks deep, you roll all 4 lines. When you look at this Capitals team, I think in September, people said this team has potential to shock some people. And then October, November, December, all I heard was this team's overachieving. They're overachieving. They're overachieving. Now here they are with the record they have, with the playoffs now. They win 4-1 in the playoffs. This is a team that's built for the playoffs. Not one player on this team was in the Four Nations face-off tournament. They got rested up during the Four Nations. They said, you know what? Hey, maybe we aren't that flashy, but we are built for the playoffs. And as I mentioned, there's a difference between being built to make the playoffs and to last in the playoffs. And I saw something about Rod Brind'Amour, how in every year he's coached the Canes, he's won around with them.
Yep.
But their kryptonite, just like some other teams have, isn't the first round,
It's
it's
the
the
second.
second round.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really, really tough for them, I believe.
Yeah, it should absolutely be interesting. And, another thing about the Capitals is they are kind of like a redemption story team for a lot of players, which it's always interesting to me when someone comes from a different team, in some cases just is traded away for almost nothing. Like they just need to get rid of them. I think Pierre-Luc Dubois is a great example of that. Even Dylan Strome is an example. Strome, I was looking at this. He has a point in every single game in the series. I mean, this is a player who has absolutely revitalized his career and is making headlines. He's not just doing well, he's exceeding what anyone thought was possible from him when he left Chicago. So that kind of stuff I think is also really crucial. And it just is like all about that timing when a team goes on a run. If the Capitals are going to do so, you need those, those
Yes.
good stories, those unsung heroes. Another one you
Thompson too.
mentioned, yes, and you mentioned the Wilson not being or them not having Four Nations guys, but Wilson was snubbed, right? And everyone talked about how Canada made such a mistake. Need to see him in the Olympics. He's a perfect example of not just being offensive, but the way he plays, that style. I mean, the hit he had on Carrier that's a game changer, right? I mean, that truly could have been a different series if that doesn't happen leading to the goal. So there's a lot of exciting people on Washington to kind of keep an eye on. And I just want to know, I'm curious to see how it will face off with Carolina, because again, Rod Brind'Amour is so known for his style and the way they want to play. Will that be able to hold up? We'll have to see. All right, let's see. We got a question actually. Is Dylan Strome the most improved veteran in the NHL this year? I mean, truthfully, you could make a case for it. He certainly is doing well. I would say another veteran that's really done well is Taylor Hall since coming to Carolina. He just got that 3-year extension. He was kind of another guy that coming from Chicago, like Strome, was sort of, what's this guy going to look like? Is he done? What's he got left? And going to Carolina has been a great fit. Who do you see as a really improved veteran?
Well, I love the point that you made about this Capitals team. There's so many guys that have points to prove. Dylan Strome.
Mhm.
I mean, Dylan Strome would be someone that I would say, I know that's easy because the commenter is literally saying that right in front of us, but
Sure,
that is the best example we could really say. I
it
think
is.
when you look at Dylan Strome, what he's been able to do, I think that he's really stepped it up and he's slotted in to be able to play with Ovechkin. And a lot of people say it's not always easy to play with all-stars. It's not easy to play
Sure.
with top players. I'm from Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, so we used to always talk about Crosby. People say it's
Mhm.
so easy to play with Crosby. You could just, put your stick on the ice and you can get a goal. No. Like Jake
No.
Gensel, I believe, was always underappreciated because he played with Crosby. And you look
Mhm.
at Dylan Strome playing with Ovechkin a lot of times, playing with these elite players, a lot of guys with points to prove. And I literally watched an interview a few days ago with Dylan Strome saying it was hard on me to get called a bust constantly for years
Yeah.
because nobody believed in me. And Logan Thompson, they said to him over in Vegas, "You're not our guy.
Right?
We're
He's
getting rid of
another great
you.
example.
You're
It's
not our guy."
crazy.
Couldn't
Yeah.
believe it.
Yeah, he didn't believe it. It certainly is something. And I mean, Dylan Strome, like, let's not forget, was he a second or third overall pick when he was drafted? I mean, it was never necessarily like a perfect start, but it is certainly interesting to see that he does have a lot more to prove, like we've talked about. All right, so we've got a final score coming out of South Florida. It's over. The Florida Panthers are moving on to the second round, so they will face the winner of Toronto and Ottawa, which is an entirely different story that we can touch on. But if you're Florida, just for fun, who are you kind of keeping your eye on? Who do you want to see?
I think that Florida, I mean, they obviously have defeated the Maple Leafs before, so
True.
I guess I would say that. But they've seen the inexperience level from the Ottawa Senators,
Hmm.
and I think that even though it's only a wild card matchup, I think that the Maple Leafs are going to be getting that kind of jolt after winning this round, if they do. Because
Hmm.
even though it's only one round, and I know the goal for the Maple Leafs is not just one round this year, they're going to get that extra motivation, the monkey off their back. They can't let that series go back to Toronto. But if you're the Panthers, you're thinking to yourself, maybe I want to see this miracle get pulled off. I want to see both these teams have to go to game 7. The answer should be, if I'm the Panthers, I'm cheering for as many possible games this series can go on. Because the irony is, all I remember hearing people say regarding the Maple Leafs series is, well, the Maple Leafs want to win this one as fast as they can, and they want to watch Tampa Bay and Florida beat each other up. Did you hear that too? That's all I saw on social media. I want to watch Tampa
Absolutely.
and Florida beat each other up. And
Yes.
well, the last time I checked, Florida just won their series. That one's over now.
Right. Well, and even Paul Bissonnette, he's a diehard Leafs fan. He doesn't hide that fact, and he's talked a lot about how no matter what happens, he wanted those two teams to just kill each other because he was hoping that Toronto was at this point. It was like when Toronto was going to win in 4 games, and they would just be hanging out waiting for whoever crawls to the finish line of this series. They're already done, and Toronto still hasn't finished their business. Just for fun, let's talk about it real quick. Okay. If Toronto can't pull it off in this game 6, are we really worried? Because I just can't see a world where they go back home in a game 7 and the pressure doesn't crumble and crush them. Ottawa's got nothing to lose. They're playing with house money, it feels like, already.
So I've told you I'm a Canadiens fan. I've been pretty open about it on the Playoff Frenzy shows. I might as well say it. And so I've had a lot of fun with Maple Leaf Nation saying, hey, look, do you know that you went 3 straight games to overtime? And they've said, well, this is Craig Berube hockey. Craig Berube hockey is winning 1-goal games. Well, I think they're fortunate the series isn't 2-2. And a lot of people are not going to want to hear this because they're going to say in those overtime victory games that they had, they outplayed them. They outplayed them. They outplayed them. They outplayed them. But at the end of the day, if someone just checked the newspaper or looked at their phone the next day, all they saw was 1-goal victory. And so when I look at this, if you're a Maple Leaf player or fan, you have to say to yourself, we get 2 more shots to close out this series. It wasn't going to be easy. In fact, Ottawa probably should have won one of the other games. So the fact that it's not tied and it's, it is what it is right now at 3-2, I think they should be happy. But with all that being said, I am labeling game 6 actually the game 7 for the Toronto Maple Leafs. It is crucial for them to win in Ottawa. And as sad as this really is, I think it's easier for them to go in and be the enemy, to be the road team. Scotiabank Arena I'll give them the credit during the playoffs. They've been loud. It hasn't been the suits. It hasn't been a library. But when they were down 2-0, after that shorthanded goal, it was quiet. I almost think it's better for this core on the Maple Leafs to go ahead and be the enemy.
I agree. And I feel like, especially in the first round, there's still such an element of nerves. I mean, these guys are professionals, but at the end of the day, there's nerves. And I think we saw this from a couple of the teams that were starting off at home with the way that some of the games were going. You almost feel like it's not a disadvantage. Obviously, there's benefits to having home ice in terms of matchups and the actual game itself. But from a mental standpoint, I really feel like you saw a lot of those teams coming out and gripping the stick too tight, just playing with that nerve. They go on the road, they start to find their game more. So for Toronto, I agree with you completely. I think that this game 6 in Ottawa is a must win from the mental side of it, from the pressure side of it, from a momentum standpoint. Like, they still feel in control. We saw the comments from Chris Tanev after the game saying, it's 3-2, we're fine. I hope that quote doesn't immediately get turned around and come back to bite him. It kind of has that feeling about it. But again, they're heading into a situation where, they are kind of the underdog because of being the road team. They don't have to worry about the home crowd and the expectations. And let's be honest, Toronto and the fans and the media are very hard on that team.
Yes.
Certainly, Montreal knows how that feels. We've seen quite a few fan bases. Vancouver this year, that's tough on their team. But to go into this game 6, I think they basically do have to get it done. So that one's going to be interesting.
You'd think it
fans,
was a game
just a
7
reminder.
loss yesterday. You'd think it was a game 7 loss based on reactions. People were covering their faces. The interviews with fans were horrible. The reaction on social media.
Someone was burning a Mitch Marner jersey. Yes. I mean, like, you're still up in the series. Like,
after game 5.
It's okay. But at the same time, from an outsider perspective, this is kind of why we all love the theater of Toronto in the playoffs, because if you don't have a horse in the race, it's pretty funny to watch. It's terrible to say, but it's true. I know people live and die by their favorite teams, but we all kind of get a little bit of a kick of this never-ending saga of them not being able to clinch. I think I saw a stat that said it was the core 4 or their main guys. It was like a 1-13 record in clinching scenario games. I mean,
Yeah.
that
And
is
0 for 30 last 30 power
horrifying.
play opportunities.
I mean, yeah. So it's very interesting. And I talked about this with someone today, but the Craig Berube factor, maybe that is going to be the difference, because it certainly feels like if there's anyone who can calm this team and mentally steward this team through to the second round and get them over this hump, I feel like it is Craig Berube. So certainly will be interesting to see. And guys, just a reminder that Playoff Frenzy Live is presented by Sticks.com. You don't need to break the bank on Sticks. You can get a pro level composite stick without the pro level price tag at Sticks.com. That's Stix.com. So make sure to head over there and check it out. Get some good gear. And don't forget that if you comment, you engage with us, we'll send you a free stick. So make sure to check that out as well. Tell us what you're thinking. Who are you rooting for? Who's going to win it all? Has your opinion changed? My bracket's not doing great. I had Tampa going really far, and I'm not really sure why now after watching them play. I don't know how much of the Tampa series you got to watch, Andrew, but it was pretty disheartening. Looking at this team from the regular season versus what they did, and I'm wondering, is this just the Florida Panthers doing what they do with their forecheck, the way they play, the way they dump the puck in, they win the battles, and they kind of just beat you down. I mean, they literally were beating each other down. But I'm curious if that was it, because it almost looked like a different Tampa team than the regular season. And when things weren't going their way, it felt like certain players were kind of giving up. Tonight was a good example of that. There were a few turnovers by Kucherov in this game against Florida, where when he lost the puck, he stopped skating. And it was like all-star Kucherov, which we all know what he did back at the all-star game. Did you get to catch any of it? And just, I guess, maybe your thoughts on Tampa being an early out when a lot of people had them picked to go very far.
Well, one thing we can hope is that Kucherov wasn't hungover for tonight's game like he was for the
That's
All-Star.
hopeful. Yes.
That's something we can hope for. I did get a chance to watch a good portion of the series, and it's so easy to say in any matchup and any series where a team was successful or not successful that depth was the answer. But when I look at the Tampa Bay Lightning when they went to the Stanley Cup Finals for 3 straight years, I saw multiple contributors. I saw a team that could win a game when Stamkos was out there. It could be no Stamkos point, no Kucherov point, no point from point, and they'd be fine. And I look at a guy like Yanni Gourde, who they brought back, didn't see much from him throughout this playoffs. Nick Paul, didn't see much from him. Anthony Cirelli, who proved himself at the Four Nations tournament as a great 200-foot center, didn't see much offensively from him. There's one guy nobody can blame, and that's Jake Gensel. He actually played well. He lived up to the fact that they brought him into Tampa Bay. But what I saw was a Florida team that just looked like they had it all. And I am so wrong about the fact that I thought it might be a slight issue, the chemistry that this Florida team could have, because they all haven't been on the same team together. They haven't had a healthy lineup.
Right.
I mean, Matthew Tkachuk comes back from the LTIR. I think he gets 2 points in his first game. He keeps going. And also the suspensions and the injuries to Barkov. This team just looked like the much, much better team. And it's crazy to say it, but they could be on their way back to the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, there was a couple series where you're like, if they get through this first round, I'm scared. That's all it takes. Like, they're on a quick path to making it all the way to the final. And I mean, again, Florida, right? We talked about Tkachuk. He missed so much time, just gets back in the lineup. Looks like he didn't miss a step. They played the first 2 games of the series without Aaron Ekblad, and they played tonight's game without Aaron Ekblad. He still has one more game of suspension left to serve that'll have to carry over. So, I mean, it is certainly going to be interesting to see who they face in the next round, and they'll have to start without him, but it looks like it doesn't matter. Again, I think it has a lot to do with the build up, the build of this team, the way they're coached by Maurice, the way they play together. I've been a part of a few teams that just have something special. They didn't lose too much other than some of the pieces on the defensive end to change that entire makeup. And I think we're seeing it again. It's more a matter of, how are they doing this? If they keep going for the 3rd year in a row to keep this going, I mean, that's a lot of hockey for anybody, but it certainly looks like with the way they started, it shouldn't be an issue. Before we wrap this up, we want to chat a little bit more about our Leafs game tomorrow. I know that we're going to have a new episode of The Big Show coming out, so I'm going to get some great takes from Michael Tracos and Ryan Kennedy, but I want to get your final take, because I think it's a game that we all have our eyes on tomorrow, Andrew.
I think everybody's going to be watching that one. And I'm not sure if those two guys will like this take I'm about to have here. And I'm very
Uh-oh.
curious if anybody's really saying this because all I hear is the Craig Berube effect. And obviously, as you
Mhm.
mentioned, game
Yeah.
6 and 7, those are the games that they want to have the Craig Berube effect involved in. But since scoring 6 goals in game 1, they have 7 regulation 5-on-5 goals since then. I mean, this team, it's
The whole
looked
time.
different offensively. Do you
Yeah.
think that the dump and chase, the protect the lead, the hey, you need to be okay with not trying to score every time down the ice is something that this team is made of? For example, Mikko Rantanen gets traded to
Mhm.
Carolina. He says, no way am I playing like this. He's like, I want out of here. I go to Dallas. Martin Necas, he gets to Colorado and he arrives. He says, wait, this is how you guys get to play hockey? Open
Right.
ice and back and
Mhm.
forth. I mean, I would have had to dump and chase every time I got the puck in
Yes.
Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm here to say that, sure, people are saying maybe Matthews could have had a few more goals. Maybe this guy should have done more. I'm very interested to see the Craig Berube effect that maybe he's stalling their offense a bit because maybe they're getting so built into their heads that we got to protect a lead. If you get a 3-2 lead in the playoffs, it's not always enough. So they went to overtime 3 straight times. And maybe I'm going to be the only one saying this, but is it Craig Berube that took them to overtime because they were satisfied with the leads they had? Who knows? We're
Mhm.
all hyping him up. At the end of the day, the Maple Leafs of old, whenever they won a playoff game, it was by multiple goals. And when they lost it, it was by heartbreak. This team is not used to these low scoring victories.
I think it's one of those things that depending on what happens in this game 6, if they win, then everyone is on board with Craig Berube hockey, and it continues just fine. If they lose, again, like we talked about with coaches, then all of a sudden there's this conversation about it. And we mentioned this earlier, but with Rod Brindamore and his team, they can always get out of the first round, but their style of hockey kind of catches up to them in the postseason as well. And maybe this free spirit allowing them to be creative, it depends. It's all about your personnel, and maybe it is good for the Leafs to learn to be more defensive, but at the same time, if you're losing all of your offense in the process, not sure that works either. You got to find a happy medium, and hopefully the Leafs can do it in game 6. All right, well, we're wrapping things up. I just want to give you guys an update on that Jets Blues score. Of course, the series tied 2-2, the game in Winnipeg. The Jets are up 2-1 at the first intermission. So certainly a game we'll keep our eyes on. We'll have all the updates on all the playoff series, where they stand as we get ready for the big show tomorrow that we'll be recording. And reminder, everybody, every night, the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy is live. Myself, Andrew, and all of our other great hosts will be here to bring you all of the post-game reactions. But Andrew, final thoughts as we head into an exciting day of hockey tomorrow.
My final thoughts, first and foremost, the future's bright for the Montreal Canadiens. They cracked the postseason. I think they're going to make a few small changes in the offseason, build for the future. But as far as the remainder of the postseason, what a first round we've seen. I think Winnipeg is going to protect home ice. I think we're going to see a game 7 in Colorado, and I think we're going to, or
Ooh,
in that series, and I think we're going to see a game 7 between LA and Edmonton. Give me game 7s. It's all I
yes.
can ask, Katie.
I agree. Final thought for the night is whatever happens, we need a couple game 7s, and certainly wouldn't be the most exciting thing in the world if we got a game 7 with the Leafs. But I know that most people watching this are praying that that doesn't happen if there's Leafs fans out there. All right, Andrew, great stuff tonight. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. That does it for the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live, presented by Sticks.com. Thanks for watching. We will see you all after the action tomorrow.